It was the maddening itching in her back that woke her up. It was those two stupid bites on her shoulder blades again, only they seemed to have gotten a lot worse. It was sometime in the middle of the night. The ward was quiet and only dimly lit. Soft footsteps sounded in the distance. Evan's bed was shrouded in darkness. Anita twisted her arm up behind herself to try and scratch. Through the white satin of her pajama top, she could feel distinct lumps under her fingertips. No, not lumps. Ridges. Two raised parallel ridges running down her shoulder blades. She sat up, alarmed now and wide awake. She forced her hand down inside the back of her pajama jacket, straining to touch one of the ridges. The welt felt tender and sore. There was a warm wetness on her fingers. The skin was broken. She pulled her hand out and held her fingers up close to her face in the half-dark. She had expected to see blood, but the wetness was clear and thick and slippery. She looked around at the sleeping figures in the nearby beds. She didn't want to call a nurse. The whole thing seemed absurd, almost unreal. The bathroom was only a little way off. There were mirrors in there, and she would be able to see what was going on with her back. She drew the covers down and slipped out of bed. She stood at her bedside, swaying a little and feeling very peculiar, lightheaded. No, not just lightheaded. Her whole body felt light, insubstantial, as if she was in a dream. She took a step forward and felt herself almost float across the floor. She smiled, enjoying the weird sensation. Light as a feather, she glided across the floor. A black-haired nurse sat at the desk in a small pool of bright light. She looked up. Anita indicated that she was heading for the bathroom. The nurse nodded and lowered her head again. Anita drifted forward. She pushed open the bathroom door and floated through. The lights were much brighter in here. There was a row of sinks opposite the toilet stalls. Over each sink was a square mirror. She felt suddenly dizzy and grabbed the edge of a sink to stop herself from falling. It felt like there were whirlwinds spinning through her body. She closed her eyes. Now it felt as if she was moving at enormous speed, racing through the air, breathless and unable to stop. She opened her eyes, gasping. She reached for a tap, needing a splash of cold water on her face. As she touched the tap, an arc of blue fire flared from her fingertips, and a fizzing, burning pain shot up to her shoulder. She let out a cry, cradling her arm against herself. And then a pain hit her that blotted out everything else. She screamed as two bolts of intense agony stabbed her in the back. The pain dragged downward, as if someone was slashing her shoulder blades with razors. She fell to her knees, doubled over. Something pushed against the back of her pajama top. There was a tearing sound. There was something growing on her back. Two things that flexed and expanded like the opening of long-fingered hands. The pain wasn't like scalpels digging into her flesh now. It was like when she had sat with her legs curled up under her for too long. The exquisitely unbearable feeling of pins and needles as the blood begins to course again. Except that it wasn't in a leg. It was in something else. Anita was on her hands and knees on the floor, her limbs folded under her, her head in her arms, her eyes tightly shut. And she could feel these things, these two unbelievable growths that had sprouted from her back. They were unfolding and spreading and expanding. She lay huddled on the cold floor for several minutes, too scared to move, almost too scared to breathe. Gradually, the discomfort faded and the fear loosened its grip on her. She lifted her head. Strange new muscles flexed on her back, and she felt the air stir. She drew herself up onto her hands and knees. There was no pain now. Grasping the rim of the sink, she pulled herself to her feet. She turned to face the mirror. What the? There was her face. Her familiar face, ash pale now with shock, gazing in utter disbelief out of the glass. And there, lifting high behind her shoulders, was a pair of iridescent gossamer light wings.